Welcome to the Intentional Success Podcast, where we unpack the top strategies, explore business trends, and drill down into best practices to help your live events production business grow and scale on purpose. I'm your host, Tom Stimson. In today's Intentional Success Podcast, I'm going to talk about organization charts, but more importantly, how they work inside of a scalable business. Today, I want to talk about organizational charts, org charts. Right now, you're probably going, oh my God, no, please don't do this. And part of you go, yay, because org charts are like that. Org charts, either you love them or you hate them. And I think it's because so many people use them incorrectly. So for some people, org charts means, oh, finally, I get to tell that SOB that, no, I don't get to do that because I don't work for you. Org charts mean, hey, I can hold people accountable saying you didn't do your job. Org charts will recognize me for how long I've been doing this. I've been at the company for 20 years. I should be at, So there's a lot of things packed into org charts that have nothing to do with organization, have nothing to do with, having the right people and the right processes in place. However, that's because we have not looked at org charts correctly, and therefore we're not applying them correctly. We're using them to fix problems rather than prevent problems, right? So when a prospect usually, or even a client, but a prospect comes to me and says, Tom, I need help with this, and well, tell me what you need help with. Well, we don't have an org chart. We keep talking about an org chart. We never get an org chart. Well, what's an org chart going to do for you? Well, we don't know what titles to have for people. Well, wait a minute. That's not what an org chart does for you. Titles. Okay. So you got a titling problem. So we're unsure what to call people. So why are titles important? Well, we're trying to figure out, how to manage accountability. Okay. So is accountability, I always ask this question. So what do you mean by accountability? Is that like understanding where the process failed so you can fix it, or understanding which person you want to drag out into the parking lot and beat with a stick? Oh, we don't really beat them with a stick, but the other one, right? So what else are you trying to solve? Well, we're trying to get some stuff done, and we know who's responsible. I want to get people to follow directions. There's Bob doesn't want to work for Mary, right? We're having trouble with our sales handoffs to operations, and we need to find a way to settle the disputes. And we got some people who stick their nose into everything. We just want them to mind their own business by making it clear whose job that is. And we talk about all these things, and when we do sit down and try and work through an organizational chart or look at their chart and ask them what's wrong with it, we always find one person who doesn't fit, but they're very important. We can't go on without them. They've been around with us forever. They know everything. They're holding us hostage and we can't get rid of them. No, we have that one. And so what we do is we call them director of special projects. Or if they've been there longer, we call them senior director of special projects, or vice president of special projects, or executive vice president of special projects, because we want them to feel important, but we don't want them to have any employees because nobody can work for them. So there's a lot of baggage in org charts, which is why I'm going to talk about it today. So everything's connected, right? I've been talking about scalability, and I'm peeling back the layers of the onion as I unpack what the implications of scalability mean for us going forward, and what happens when we follow this model and what it allows us to do. One of the things that's really magical about it is the relationship between scalability and organization charts. And, oh, Tom, tell me more about that. Oh, great. Finally, now you're interested. So all of this is connected, right? I look at a business holistically. All the moving parts are connected. If you're having a problem in one area, there are manifestations of that problem in other areas, right? If you're successful in one area, we can duplicate it in another area. All of this stuff is connected. We move one thing, three other things move, right? So org charts are the perfect representation. They're the manifestation of people and process. They are a map. They help us understand how to work inside the organization, what our role inside the organization is. It helps outsiders understand how all of this works. But it's people and process. It's not people and titles. It's not hierarchies. Okay. It's not just processes, because there are people involved. So we got to connect the people to that and their roles inside the organization. So people, processes, all of it's connected here. There's a huge story to be told in organization charts if we look at them correctly, because it is all about getting things done, right? We want to get work done. We want to know how to get it done. Who's going to help me do it? Who's responsible for the areas that I'm going to affect while I'm moving through this organization, making change, whether it's me as an outsider or you as an insider, because everything is connected. So we are always interacting with an org chart whenever we're working inside of an organization. And the more we understand about it, the easier it is going to be for us to get things done and get decisions made, which is probably the biggest thing that I find small organizations meaning less than 5,000 people, struggle with. So if you're a huge company, you can have pockets of organization that are 50 people or less that are struggling to get things done because they can't get to a decision. They can't narrow down responsibility. They don't have the authority to do the things that are important for their mission or their goal. And organization charts can help us with all of that because, again, it's about people, process, and, of course, roles. So scalable companies are special in that we have three primary roles. And there's a fourth role, but I'm going to talk about, the selling role, the sales and marketing business development role, getting business, generating revenue. What's the process? Who are the people? What are the roles involved in doing that? And then once we win a piece of business, it's the planning. How do we implement this business? How do we plan for it? How do we schedule it out? How do we assign resources? And then there's the procurement role, which means because we have to hire people and outsource and contract and buy things to get this project done. So we have to sell it, we have to plan it, we have to procure it. And that's our basic business cycle. Now, the fourth thing is, I do need some admin around that. I need some executive leadership around that for strategy, oversight, analysis, all those sorts of things. But I don't need a ton of it, right? The size of an admin team is the same as for a 20-person company as it is for a 200-person company. An executive team will probably expand because executives will have more and more specialization. But for a lot of my audience, who are less than 50 employees, you can pretty much have a, managing director, general manager, president, CEO, one person, an admin team, which is, the finance people, HR, and all that other procurement, purchasing, inventory management, all the things that affect the balance sheet in one group. And then you've got selling, planning, and procurement. So now we've got a team of people who are focused on doing the work of the company. We have a team of people who are focused on supporting those people so they can do their work. Right? It seems pretty darn simple, but we struggle with it. Now, in an org chart, what does that look like? Yeah, that's the wrong question, right? Let's look at the roles that are actually involved and how the authority for those roles is actually doled out. So if I have a CEO for an organization, I can have a director of operations, but what is operations? I didn't mention operations when I talked about the primary functions of an organization, selling, planning, and procuring. Operations generally reflects something that we have titled, we've applied in our industry to a group of people who work on the delivery side of the organization. That's not necessarily operational because operations is all through the organization. So where does operations end? We are working and there is sales operations, there is planning operations, there's procurement operations. So operations is a distraction, right? We have people who work on planning and procurement, which we typically would call operations. But we need to set aside the operational term for a minute so we can get our head around all of this. All right. So as I'm looking at this, let's just break it down into the simple pieces and work through them and see how that might manifest in an organization chart. Here's what I'm typically recommending. I'm taking a look at the sales team, because if we don't have sales, the rest of this doesn't really matter. So let's work on getting our sales pipeline full. Let's have a strong forecast so that we can justify having the planning and procurement team, that we can keep those people in place because I've got future work. Without future work, I don't need them, right? So sales is kind of important. So how do we get sales? Well, we have marketing. Well, most of our marketing is a passive effort. It happens while we sleep. Yes, there are people putting pieces in place, doing promotional things, maybe planning events and sort of thing. But marketing has to happen in order to drive opportunities or leads into the sales funnel where we can start acting upon them. But I'm going to pick it up when we actually have a prospect, an opportunity, somebody wanting to look at a long-term relationship with us where they want to, bring us lots of work or, offer us a lot of shows to do, or a specific show or project that they would like to get done, and they're talking to us about it. Now, what is supposed to happen? Well, you've heard me teach for years about, we've got to slow this process down. We've got to ask questions. We've got to set up meetings, and we've got to do a discovery process that helps define the project in customer terms in a way that we can deliver and take out a lot of the guesswork. One of the biggest guessworks, of course, is, well, what's your budget? We know that we can ask that question, but the client doesn't actually always know the answer. So we need a selling process that does that. So we know we've got this process. What does that process need? Well, not every salesperson knows everything about doing shows, right? So they need some experience at the table sometimes, maybe not all the time, but often, to help them with, technical design, creative solutions, innovation. What's a way of doing something that's never been done before? That is part of the selling process. Now, can that be part of the sales team? Oh, no, we can't. Oh, I know exactly who that person would be, but no, we can't put them on the sales team because we need them to do shows. And that's where the wheels start to fall off the wagon, right? We're not using people at their highest and best use. And a scalable organization chart always uses people at their highest and best use. So you have some individuals, or someone, or maybe you need to get someone who doesn't need to be out doing shows maybe anymore, or they're not extremely well suited to it, or they are better at supporting sales and knowing how to take this discovered project, unpack it, budget it, and make it doable, right? So that planning can take over once the job is confirmed and put all the parts and pieces in place, tell procurement what to hire, who to buy, all that kind of stuff. All of that can happen. So the first thing we've done is we've taken somebody who's inherently technical. We might think of them as production management, project management, operations, and we're putting them over into the sales process because that's their highest and best use. And that helps us complete the selling process, because very few jobs can get sold with a single salesperson who knows how to do everything, including doing their quote and solving all the technical problems that go along with it. Let's put somebody on that team, because that is an every single day need. That need does not stop because you guys are busy doing a show. Right. Now, so we've kind of got sales fleshed out. It's 1, 2, or 30 people, but there includes some technical people in there that can help us develop the opportunity from a technical standpoint, put the right budget together, make sure that we've got enough personnel to do the job correctly, that we have good fit and finish on the equipment for that job, and that we've defined what has to happen next. Now, planning is taking a job that's, 80% vetted, right? Because now we're in the planning phase, so things change, right? Who needs to be involved in the planning? Well, Planning is also a little bit of that project management, production management mindset, but it's also scheduling. It's looking at, what's the best use of our assets? How am I going to move this through my organizational system? Do I have equipment that I need from one show that I need to get to this next show? Is there a way to do that? That's planning. That's mapping all of this out. Let's look at the talent needs for the show, the technicians that we need. Who would be appropriate for that? Can we get them? Do we need to move people off of this show and onto that show because that makes more sense? They'll be at a higher use. They'll be at a better use in the right position. And we're moving all these moving parts around, okay, which is what planning is all about. We make a plan so we can change it till we get to the point where we can actually start locking some stuff in. And this can be, weeks and months before a project that I can start buying. Hey, I know we're going to be out of stuff. Procure this. We need to book these people. Do that. We need to check on this travel. Pull the trigger now if the pricing is good. All that kind of stuff. So planning tells procurement what to do. So think about the talent that I need in the planning group, okay, which is knowledge about how to do large complex projects as well as small ones. All jobs get the same treatment. It's just faster doing a small one than it is a large one. So I need an organization that does that. What does that team look like? Okay. And they need to be familiar with the selling process because they are the backup to sales. In other words, sales can say, hey, even the technical aid, technical director or technical designer in the sales group might need to come back to planning and say, hey, how could we pull this off? Is there a way to do all of this? So there is overlap between these organizations. Now, what's in my procurement? Well, procurement, what I described is we need I'm not describing any direct costs in this organizational chart, as you've noticed. I've not talked about technicians being on my staff, lead technicians. I'm not even talking, you don't even necessarily have to have equipment, right? But in procurement, I need to get all of those things. And I may be procuring for my own organization, and I can put that into that procurement group, or I can put that into the planning group. But a lot of procurement is going to be booking talent, booking logistics, what we would call subrentals, to get all those parts and pieces together to do the show, to complete the order. Eventually that order is going to get to some sort of warehouse operation. If you're a production rental company and you have equipment and you are going to prep an order, it's going to get scrubbed probably back in the planning group, right? Because, this is not sequential. It doesn't mean that sales is never going to be involved again. And once planning has launched the job, it doesn't mean that it's not going to come back to them at later stages. So we got to scrub the order. I got a warehouse manager who decides how many people he needs to work on how many days. And they bring those people in. We prep those shows. We put them on the trucks that have been procured and or planned, right? And then in a perfect world, we finish up the day, clean up the warehouse, everything's back in place, and we're done. So we've treated this as a project all the way through, which would be the most scalable model you could have. But that scalability doesn't happen if we don't look at the processes in there. Now, how do I translate those processes into an org chart? I'll share a story. Many years ago, when company I worked for was being sold, the owners had made some very wise financial decisions in growing the company over 10 years. We grew very, very quickly. It was a good time for them to sell the business. Basically, it was taking on investors so that we can continue in the business in a larger organization with future opportunities, yada, 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 yada. At that time, we needed to have an org chart. Well, we kind of had an org chart. We kind of knew who was who in the business, but we'd never really drawn anything out. And now we were in due diligence, and we needed to have org charts, and bankers were asking questions, and brokers were asking questions, and buyers were asking questions, and we needed something to talk to. But every manifestation of the org chart didn't work for us because organization is situational. So we ended up with 2 org charts, and we presented them. Whenever anybody asked, we always presented them this way, including to employees. We have 2 org charts. we have one org chart that is basically the selling and planning phase of the business. And here's who's in charge of what, and here's how the organization is set up. And it was kind of flat, but it wasn't super flat, but it was a little flat. There's probably 3 layers in there for a company with, 50, 70 employees. And then we had another org chart, which is when there is a show involved. And so if the show is on, in other words, we're loading in, we're engaged, the people on show side are at the top of the organizational chart. They are the boss, okay? Not the president of the company. The person on show side is the boss, because whatever the show needs takes precedence over everything else. And so we had 2 org charts. We had the pre-show org chart and the during show org chart. And the during show org chart was extremely flat because it's the person who's holding the problem and everybody else at their disposal. So that led me to the idea of, okay, internal customers. Org charts, we all serve somebody else, but in org charts, it always looks like the serving goes down. The people at the bottom serve the people at the top. Or if you're enlightened, you say, no, the people at the top serve the people at the bottom. Either way, it only goes one way. And in organizations with processes, particularly organizations that have a selling, planning, and procurement process, the servant piece goes back and forth constantly all through the process. So my internal customer today could be you, and tomorrow those roles could be reversed depending on what we do. All right. So a warehouse manager who's waiting for an order to be scrubbed is the internal customer of the planning group that needs to scrub the order. Now, once the order is prepped, we've got a final sheet, which now the planning group is the internal customer because they need that to give to the field crew or the project management who's going to go out and execute the show. So there's always this constant back and forth as I'm waiting for you so that I can do my job, and then you're waiting for me so that you can do your job. Rather than I finished my job, I'm handing it off to you and washing my hands of it. I'm not a big fan of handoffs, by the way. What I'm very interested in is the triggers that say, hey, you've got the job to this point. I'm going to take it now because I can do my work. And then the next person is going to take it from me when I've done enough of my work because my internal customer is waiting for me to get this done. So how do I put that into an organization chart? I hope you're starting to see it now, because if I have somebody who's in charge of the sales group, what they're really in charge of is the sales processes. And I don't necessarily manage people, though there's always some people management in any organization. I first have to manage the process, right? And most of my people issues or challenges or opportunities, whatever you want to call it, are built around process. If this person is underperforming, are they underperforming because they're simply not doing the work, or because the process is not supporting them properly? Do I need to fix the process, or do I need to fix the person? So who's in charge of the processes for this area? Because the first thing I want to do is fix processes, and then I can coach the people to use the processes better. And if at some point in time they're not coachable, or they're not going to be successful, maybe I have them in the wrong role. This is not their highest and best use, or they just simply don't have the aptitude, or they don't fit into your culture, whatever it is. We've done everything we can, and we can separate ourselves from that person with a clear conscience. Then I have somebody who's in charge of the planning group, and they need to be the master of all things planning. And it's like the person in sales needs to be the master of all. They don't need to be the best salesperson. They may need to be the best sales process person. Planning doesn't need to be the ultimate knowledge of all things doing shows and technical and all that kind of stuff. They need to be the best at managing that process, okay, and defining it and refining these processes because they're constantly being tinkered on. And the same thing in procurement. I need a much higher level of knowledge in procurement than anything we've ever done before. This is not an admin role. And while I've often advocated that, you can put an admin into a talent staffing role and tell them who to call, that just means that you're in procurement too, because you're creating that definition. So if you want to have admins doing the actual purchasing, that's fine, but the knowledge has to be in the group, right? So the knowledge can't just come from planning, because those decisions have to be made in real time as we're moving through it. So I've got to have that knowledge actually in the procurement group. So I need somebody who's familiar with recruiting and vetting people, making determinations about who's the right person to put on this job if that other person isn't available, so that our internal customer planning says, I need to fill this position. I need this A1. Here are some people that we think would be great. We're going to take that criteria and fill it to the best of our capabilities. But I need more knowledge in my procurement group, because I've elevated the importance of procurement, because it's not just looking at the guys that are sitting on the bench and doing the I'm calling it lazy now. I'm just calling it out. Having technicians on staff in this day and age is lazy, right? There's very few business reasons to do it other than you're too lazy to develop a freelance pool and find what are probably going to be better talent than what you can hire full time. That's probably a whole nother podcast. So now what does my organization look like? I've got head of sales, head of planning, head of procurement. I've got my admin group, which is, finance, office, business management, all those things, IT. And I've got my corporate group, my CEO, who might, if the organization is large enough, have some people underneath them to, at the CFO level, COO level, CMO level, whatever those things might be. It doesn't matter. They should act as a one person with delegated authority. So it doesn't really matter how many people are in there. The fact is there's an entity above these four entities, right? Selling, planning, procurement, admin. That covers my organization. Now, where do I fit into the org chart? Well, if I'm on the planning team, I can have a title, right? And I can bring a skill set to that. But remember, we don't need large organizations when we're scalable. I will probably have a much larger sales group than I have a planning group, because my planning group aren't going out on show site to execute shows. They're always planning all of the shows coming up. So I can have a small group in a 20-person company. I could have 5 people in that group, and they can plan, $20 million worth of business, right? Procurement doesn't have to be a big group. They have to be an extremely knowledgeable group. There might be 5 people in that group. I might have 5 or 7 people in the sales group. Okay. And then I've got admin, another 3 people. It's 20 folks. 20 people in a scalable business. I mean, you can do $10, $15 million, no problem. You can do $20 million if you know what you're doing. There's really no limit to what you can do. Now, before the pandemic and the non-scalable version of job cost thinking that we've had for what seems like hundreds of years, that company, that $20 million company, needed 50 or 70 or 80 employees. And trust me, I've been there, done that. I helped run that company. That company today should be 25 employees. And what's going to help you get there is a fresh look at organization charts. Look at the functions within the organization, the processes that you have to execute. Scalability tells us what they are. And then we put the highest and best use talent into those roles. I probably need more talented people, but I need fewer of them. And I always can procure. I can always add on talent, buy talent on a per project basis, some of whom could be extremely high value, high knowledge talent to get us through those periods where we need them. So I become extremely efficient. So it's a different way of looking at org charts. But let's face it, we're a non-traditional industry. Traditional org charts are probably not going to work for us. And this all comes to, what does an owner want out of their business? Well, they want a lot of things. They like satisfaction. They want to make some money, but they want harmony. And a fresh look at org charts will create the harmony they need by creating these spheres where sales lives and planning lives and procurement lives, and all those spheres are equal. They all contribute different things and different knowledge and manage different processes, but they all work together for that common goal. And now, which sphere do I live in? Is there a hierarchy inside the spheres? A little bit of one. But again, I don't have a lot of worker bees in a scalable organization. I have a lot of people who know a lot of things and do a lot of work and get a lot of stuff done. So for the right people, the hierarchy is going to be less important, because the hierarchy is, do we get the job done? Right? The goal, the shared goal of getting the project done wisely. And the arbiter of that is the person who's leading that group. And that's basically all the hierarchy we need. So anyway, I hope this is giving you some insights on how you can look at organization charts, why it's important to get away from these hierarchical charts, who reports to who, because they don't actually solve the problems that you're trying to solve. And then by embracing the scalability model, we have an opportunity to create an organization that operates much more clearly, actually meets the criteria of who does what, how do I get things done, who's technically going to be accountable for all of this, who do I need to listen to, how does an order move through the system. All of that is developed in a org chart that is based on processes, which are spheres of influence throughout the organization. So I call it a process chart with people in it, because making a people chart and trying to assign processes usually means I've got the same person showing up in 5 places on the org chart because of all the different processes that they do, which may or may not be in one sphere, but maybe they should be in one sphere. So lots of fun, lots of food for thought. Thanks for letting me share this today. This was a little ad hoc podcast for me. I said, what am I going to do today? I want to talk about this. Here we are. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for listening. If you want to find out more about today's episode, go to trstimson.com/podcast, where you'll find the show notes, related links, and tons of other valuable resources. If you haven't already subscribed to the Intentional Success Podcast, please do so, and I'd greatly appreciate if you would rate and review the show. Also, if you think you might be a good fit to work together or want more information about the Stimson Group, I'd love to hear from you. Visit trstimson.com for more information.